in Austria, in this office of this organization, we were dissatisfied with our impact, and we thought we know so little of the natural environment and the challenges that people who protect nature face in different countries, that we decided, okay, what would be a better time than now to actually travel and meet people. And that was our goal. We decided to quit our job and to set off to talk about nature conservation with all kinds of different people in different countries, to also speak to people and to just get basically an understanding of what we are facing together, what are the global challenges, and what kind of innovative solutions people apply in different countries.
Yeah, because we realized that even though it's a very much a global problem, the biodiversity and climate crisis that happens everywhere, the solutions can only be local, because every ecosystem is different, every society is different, every economy is different, and that all has to be taken into account to find solutions that work for the environment but also work for the people. Yeah, so this is why we started this journey, to see those solutions, see how people in other parts of the world implement them, what challenges they face implementing them. And then we decided to do it on bicycle, because it's the most environmentally friendly, it's carbon neutral, it's just for us the most enjoyable way to travel, because you don't miss anything. If you travel 500 kilometers, you experience everything that happens along those 500 kilometers, and don't just sit in a bus or in a train and everything just flies by. And you get your exercise in as well, so you don't have to worry about that during the journey.
So we decided on the bicycle. We didn't really know what we are gonna, what the size of what we embarked on. But we feel very comfortable in nature, so we basically carry everything on our bicycles, like you see here. We have bags in the back and the front. Our bicycles weigh about 45 kilograms with everything included, and we sleep in a tent, so we don't plan where we will end up that day. We just cycle as far as we want to, and then we find a place to sleep. So this was kind of the routine, but of course many times we were pushed beyond our comfort zone. There were many times where the path has been unexpected, where we got sick, when things didn't turn out the way they were supposed to, when the bicycles got damaged, and a lot of mental challenges as well. So we haven't said yet, but we started in April 2022. So it has been 2 years of traveling from Germany to Singapore, and over 21,000 kilometers of cycling. So you can imagine the experiences that we managed to acquire on this journey.
Yeah, so then just to explain our route a little bit, as Hanna just mentioned, we started back in Germany. We crossed Europe all the way to the Black Sea, then spent 3 months in Turkey, then spent the winter in the Caucasus Mountains. Then unfortunately we couldn't cross Iran because it was not safe at that moment. So we took a plane to Delhi, cycled through India first, Nepal, back to India, into Pakistan, back to India, all the way south to Goa, then up and then into Bangladesh. Then unfortunately again we couldn't cross Myanmar on land, so we had to fly to Bangkok, and then so we flew to Bangkok, then went first to the north of Thailand, went over to Laos, cycled through Laos, all the way down in Vietnam, then through Cambodia, again back to Bangkok, and then all the way down to Singapore.
Why can't you cross border? Is there a restriction?
Sorry?
No, we couldn't cross. The land borders are closed because of the civil war. So we had to fly over Burma.
Or they don't allow you to come
No.
in, go in at all?
You can fly in, but you cannot cross on land. and then you have to fly out. So it just has a limited exams. And then also within the country, there is only a very limited amount of places that we can visit. So we were in contact with some conservationists there, and they said it's not a good time to visit.
Yeah, so in total, Singapore is our last point. We will, in 2 days, actually fly back home to Germany.
Oh, yeah.
So in total, we cycled over 21,000 kilometers, visited 20 countries, met over 250 people, and over 100 organizations or individuals that we wrote articles about that you can all find on our website.
And then, I mean, it would be really, we would sit here for days if we would start talking about all the projects that we visited, and we would be very bored. So we would just like to focus on Southeast Asia, recap what we've experienced in Malaysia, and then in general talk with you together about some of the kind of overarching issues, conservation issues that we observed in Southeast Asia, and then get your opinions about it as well. So in Malaysia, we visited several organizations who focus on primate conservation. Already before in Vietnam, we started learning about illegal wildlife trade, and then that's why kind of our path or our interest also led towards primate conservation. We visited the Malaysian Primatological Society, who are doing various different projects concerning primates. They also focus on urban, like human-wildlife interactions, but also study behavioral ecology of certain primates, and apply all kinds of interesting initiatives like building canopy bridges, for example, in cities to make it accessible for primates to kind of live in that environment. And then we also visited the Gibbon Conservation Society. They are focusing on rescuing gibbons who have been the subject of wildlife trade. So they basically try to find those people who own these gibbons as pets. Legally, it's not so easy to confiscate them, but they try to convince them with common sense, because many people who own wildlife, they are not really aware about the impact that they are doing. So simply talking with them already helps, and that's how they acquired quite a lot of gibbons, and now they are exploring how to rehabilitate them and how to be able to release them to the wild. And then,
Yeah, and then we visited the organization Mahlzeit that specializes on the conservation of marine mammals. So with them we went out to a dolphin survey in Penang. I had some very interesting days on the water and explored a topic that we haven't covered at all before, marine conservation, which is again completely different than what we talked about. And then we also visited Taman Negara Pahang, the biggest national park of Peninsular Malaysia, and one of the biggest still intact primary rainforests in all of Southeast Asia, which of course you can't see much of because it's luckily inaccessible, but just to imagine the size was already very impressive. Yeah, and then we want to talk about some of the topics that were most prominent whenever we talk to people. So the first one that is, especially in Thailand, a very big topic is animal tourism. For example, in Thailand, some surveys show that seeing elephants is one of the biggest reasons that people go to Thailand. There are over 4,000 elephants living in captivity in Thailand at the moment.
and there are 4,000 wild elephants, so it's the same amount of wild elephants than the elephants that are living in captivity.
Yeah. And we visited many conservationists, many different kind of sanctuaries for rescued wildlife, but also, for example, an elephant park that has turned into a very ethical place where you can just follow elephants without riding them, without touching them. But yeah, we really heard all kinds of stories, from a park in Cambodia where they offer orangutan boxing shows, where they train orangutans to perform a show for the visitors. To the sanctuaries that we visited were really animals that have suffered horribly before, often from illegal wildlife trade, but also as pets, get a great life. So we still couldn't make up our mind what is the right thing to do, and many of the conservationists we met also don't have a clear answer. Is animal tourism something good? Is it something bad? So we would also like to hear what you think about that, or if you have ever visited a place and have any thoughts about that.
Have you? It's an open question now. Has anyone ever participated in some kind of animal tourism activities? Yeah?
Yeah, I sat on the elephant in Thailand. Yeah.
And
how was that experience?
I think it's good experience because when you're up on the elephant, you can actually get close to some of the animals. We actually saw a tiger in the distance.
Okay.
So you were riding on
I was riding on the elephant. Yeah. That was in the 80s now.
Yeah.
I don't know about now.
Yes.
Still doing the ball. The ball was still doing the ball.
Yeah, so about the elephant riding, that most people say you shouldn't do. Because, and even though elephants are very big animals, they're not very good at carrying anything on their back. Unlike horses, who can like tolerate that very well, elephants very quickly get health problems if they're
Not that heavy, so it's okay.
Yeah, and unfortunately, many places where you can do elephant riding, they have to do 8-10 tours a day. So yeah, that is really. There are ethical sanctuaries. There are also, for example, the World Animal Protection, an international NGO, certifies ethical elephant sanctuaries where you can just go and just watch them, which is very fascinating. We visited 2 places where that is possible, and just seeing them do their thing is already very impressive.
So that's kind of like what we learned constitutes ethical elephant tourism, for example, that there would be no riding, no touching, no bathing with the elephants, and also no breeding of the elephants, because of course eventually the idea is that these elephants, they live as long as humans, so they live up to 8 years, maybe in captivity even like quite a long time. So it is kind of the only way for them to survive in these kind of sanctuaries or elephant centers. But the idea is to kind of phase out this tourism. That's why breeding is also not considered ethical.
So what is the global conservation community's perspective on animal tourism? Is there a...
Yeah, that's the thing. There's no clear opinion. Also, when we talk to people that are very involved in the elephant tourism, they said if it's done right, it's not so bad. If the elephants are treated well, like many say it should be outphased, but others said it's a very important part of economy in Thailand. It's the livelihood of many people there, and to just shut that down would create more harm than good. And yeah, there are many different places. There are many different species that you can see in different kind of things. The overarching agreement is basically just that they should be treated as well as possible. The problem is that that is often hard to tell from the outside. So for example, elephants love to bathe, but sometimes when you can book like bathing with elephants, that means they have to bathe 8 times a day, and they don't like that.
And
One time
the skin is also not good.
yeah, and it can be harmful for the skin as well. So
I have participated in such before in Malaysia, in Pahang. We have a sanctuary over there. And it's in a day, I think there's only a specific time that they will be entering into the water.
Okay.
And so the participants will have to adhere to that timing. If you miss the timing, then you don't get to experience that. And again, I think in Pahang, there's no riding. It's all about watching, taking photos from far and stuff and all. And you get into the water with the elephant, specific time, but not too close and not too many people. So there are some way of doing that as well. And I suppose that seemed quite sustainable. Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's no, or like one certificate or so that you can follow. But in general, like as much offhand as everything is, and if it's not too often a day, it's a good sign. And what definitely is like should be avoided is if they put babies on display. So elephant babies should not be a tourist magnet; they should be behind the scenes.
Has elephant tourism led to more wild elephants in China over the years?
To more wild elephants.
Yeah, so there's 4,000 you said.
Yeah.
Were there maybe less in the 80s or 70s?
No, so in general, if it leads to anything, then it's probably less, because it's still hard to tell whether the elephants are caught to be used in tourism. We met one person who is hoping to rewild captive elephants in the future, but that's still far away because they're very big animals and they can cause a lot of conflict. They can destroy a whole crop field within a day, basically. So it's a very sensitive topic. So at the moment, there's no like rewilding of captive elephants or supporting a population through former captive elephants.
And it's also kind of, from a human perspective, many people who go to these sanctuaries, they believe that all the elephants are these tame, large, like peaceful giants, because that's what they are used to. They just meet females who are very much habituated to people, and then they think that in the wild that's the same. So there is a lot of human-elephant conflict that is resulting from people not responding well to wild elephants as well. So actually, it is a tricky situation because wild elephants are very different from these kind of captive elephants who have been bred for generations.
Basically, when their habitat is endangered, elephants will they might go on rampages. Because in Bangladesh, I go to the hospital because we have refugee camps over there, and when the Rohingya refugees came in, the Bangladesh government cleared a lot of forests, and I think till now they're still, so they actually build watchtowers for volunteers to go on them to look for elephants coming and approaching them. Because they are refugees, they have killed people, they have destroyed animals.
Yeah, then the cause of human wildlife conflict is always the habitat loss. If there is enough space for a wild population, normally there is also no problem with human wildlife conflict.
But regarding elephants, we have visited initiatives that were that had many interesting solutions. So they would, for example, put up beehives as fences, natural fences around crop fields, because elephants are afraid of bees. And that works really well. There are also initiatives that explore planting different crops that elephants don't like so much, but are still financially viable for farmers. So they would plant chili, they would plant lemongrass, and some other things that elephants are not at all interested in.
But I suppose one of the solutions that has been cited quite some time is that also to make sure, while this part of the conflict is being avoided, but it's also about making sure that some other things that they would like to eat is present in their own natural ecosystem, because elephants migrate quite a lot. So as long as within the migration route there is something that they can get, instead of trying to go to the site to look for something else.
Yeah, the habitat preservation is always number one. And we visited, for example, in central Thailand, a reserve where the reserve used to be like big forest and all the way to a river, a big river. So the elephants lived in the forest and would go to the river to drink. But then they cut off the access to the river. They made the reserve smaller and created fields along the river. So of course then the elephants started migrating through those fields to get to the river to drink, and that created a lot of conflict. So preserving the habitat is always the most important step to avoiding any kind of conflict. Any other experiences?
I just want to add on the boxing one. I have a similar experience on rescue animal that needs to do performance. I went to Philippines once, a rescue center. All the marine mammals were all either paralyzed or handicapped by dynamite fishing and speedboats. Some of them may have lost a fin, and because of the dynamite fishing, the shock waves, some of the dolphins are all permanently dead. That means they can't walk.
Wow.
Then, and that small aquarium, they cannot like just buy the entrance fees. So they need to, all the injured dolphins, they need to perform shows. But some of the people a bit too passionate, oh, why they are clowns, you know, why they must go for, but no choice, because some, like, I know all these little rescue centers, they are very poor, they need to have funds.
Yeah.
So I understand why all these rescue programs, sometimes they have no choice, they need to perform just to raise funds. This is just a view that I have experienced in Philippines. All these handicapped dolphins, they need to perform just to raise funds for.
So many animals are caught to keep as pets in people's homes. Some people have private zoos where they keep all kinds of animals, or tourist attractions, as we talked about, gibbons that are trained to do tricks. Elephants can still be caught in the wild to appear in these sanctuaries. Then meat consumption, which is mostly a local issue, so they are caught and then they are sold on these wet markets locally.
And it is not necessarily for poor communities, because these types of meat, they're very expensive. Like this turtle, it would be maybe $100 or something to buy one big turtle. It's more kind of like the delicacy of the richer for special occasions. So that's how it works.
Yeah, so it's not only because people cannot afford any other meat, it's often because they specifically seek out certain species to eat. And then one thing which we also were not aware is that animal testing is especially for the long-tailed macaques a problem. So the long-tailed macaques you can see everywhere across Southeast Asia. However, they're classified as vulnerable because they're continuously caught to do medicine and also cosmetic testing on. And apparently that became especially bad during the COVID pandemic because China shut down, and China normally breeds a lot of macaques and sends them everywhere to do medical testing. And then when the COVID vaccines were developed, they needed a lot of macaques to do testing. So, for example, in Cambodia, they told us that people started just catching the macaques from the wild, put them in farms, and then pretended that they were farmed there, and then exported them to the US, for example, for testing there.
And so we met really a lot of people in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Thailand, in Malaysia, who focus on rescuing these animals from illegal wildlife trade. But then the topic is, again, like similar to what you said about the marine mammals, like what do you do with all these animals who might have like physical disabilities, might be severely traumatized mentally and cannot really function in a society. So they end up in these sanctuaries, and either they are part like a tourist attraction, or the question is what conservationists are trying to figure out: is there a possibility to rewild them? Many people think that when an animal is rescued from captivity, that it can just be released. That it's okay. It has escaped from its troubles, and then now we can release the animal. But actually these wild animals, they are habituated to humans. Often when it comes to primates, their behaviors have changed. Gibbons, they have very long arms, and they're used to just living in the trees. They don't go down to the ground. But when people keep them, they treat them as human babies. So they walk on the ground, and they forget how to move in the trees. They forget to forage, how to forage for themselves, how to even find a mate, everything. It's just they don't learn at all. So the question is there a possibility still to train them to be the animals that they are actually? So we met organizations who focus on gibbon rehabilitation, who actually take years teaching gibbons how to move, use their arms, they pair them up, find a mate for them, and then they release them, and they still, it takes many, many years, maybe 5-6 years to get to a point where a group of gibbons can be released. So even when they are rescued from wildlife trade, there is so much more work and funding and resources that have to go into trying to give them life afterwards.
Yeah, so what do you think about it? Do you think we should try to revive them again, or is it better to just give them a good life in a sanctuary until they die peacefully? Happens on one hand because there's more and more cash crops being grown, so forest is clear to create more fields, which in Malaysia is mainly palm oil. In Thailand, for example, is mainly rubber plantations.
But also construction, like buildings.
Yeah, and the construction of new settlements and new roads. And we have seen great examples of how wildlife can adapt. So this is a photo of a dusky langur that lives in Georgetown in Malaysia, and they live in residential areas now. So they've completely adapted to the life in a city. But you can see it, they are moving a lot on these thin electricity lines, and even though they're monkeys, that's still not very safe for them. So they can easily get electrocuted if something is wrong with the line, or they just fall, and if they fall on a road, it's very easy that they very easily die. So wildlife can adapt. We've seen great examples. Also in India, we, for example, see crocodiles that live in the middle of the city, really. But of course, there are limits to that, you know.
Yeah, it's on one hand. Then the question is, how can we tolerate them in our urban environments? And then also, how much longer can we destroy their own habitats and push them into these conflict situations with us? Because also, for example, this dusky langurs, they are endangered primates. And now they really, it's really hard to imagine, we were shocked, but they live in, you know, like, they just eat the mangoes of people's, like the mango trees in people's gardens, you know, like also as a resident, I mean, you're probably not so happy that your mangoes are being eaten by these langurs, but where can they go? Like, they have nowhere else to go. So it needs that kind of tolerance from people to say, okay, well, I'm just going to appreciate that these animals now live here with me, that I can give some space for them, and maybe for me it's a good trade-off that I can just observe them, and in return I give them a couple of my mangoes.
Yeah, but of course it's not ideal in any way. And what is really the problem that in most cases land is cleared without doing a proper assessment before what kind of impact that's going to have on the nature. We like in many places around Southeast Asia, we heard that people just clear land, and then they say, oh, this is not forest anymore, so now I can just start growing anything here. And then, you know, they just chop down forest with the hope that they can make some use of it beforehand, instead of developing it and then checking what kind of, doing any kind of environmental assessment. Yeah.
Hanna and Jonas, why don't you all take a seat?
How to live sustainably in the future, and all this knowledge should be also exported outside as well. A lot of skills that are present here, because it's a much more developed country than other Southeast Asian countries, should be also, like the other countries, would be very much needing those skills. These are some things. Yeah.
So I agree with you on this that when you look at Singapore, so even if we lose every nature space in Singapore, every little bit, does that impact the environment around the globe? Does it? Yeah, that's that tiny little bit. So we have all Malaysia that is how many times the size of Singapore?
Singapore is a stop for migratory drugs.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just saying that the amount that Singapore can do is quite limited in sense. Right? As I say, even if you conserve 100% of it or you use 100% of it, it's not significant. If you take the whole as a context. But I agree with you on it. Because if you look at Singapore, how we currently, we are doing quite well. We are dealing with development as well as nature. The balance way in some sense, still here and there. But the kind of lessons learned, whatever we learn here, like say, can be explained. I think that's the more important part of Singapore is that we have some good policies that can be exported. Not that we are perfect or anything like that, but there are some good policies that can be exported, such as I think we are very strict with the online trade in Singapore. I mean, they really they found a whole batch of elephant tusk, ivory, like millions of dollars without even thinking. Gosh, this one. They don't think about it. But they don't care about wherever you are, they just arrest you without comment. So I think those policies are good, that can be used by other cities as well. I won't say countries, there are cities, so there are other cities that can follow some of us. So, and also because we are very small, we are actually very mobile in a way that we are able to change policies and adapt quickly. So with that, it means that we have a lot of opportunities to experiment. So we may get it wrong, when we change our action a little bit, and navigate a little bit, and we get it right, and then, if people think that they are doing it right, that's the formula that they can follow. That's the case. So I think that is the major contribution of Singapore as far as conservation is concerned.
Yeah, I think there's a great chance in a way because Singapore can show if we can work in here with such a dense population, then definitely we can work in places where the population density is much lower. Like if we can find a balance here, then we will definitely be able to find a balance in other places as well.
I think that if we lose our green here in Singapore, I think it will impact us. And
it will impact us, but not in a...
It might impact the world because already we are so urbanized. So we are losing our green spaces, and now the current debate is about LTA leasing out the green spaces beneath the highway, right? So the more green we lose, the ordinary Singaporean will get less and less naturalized, And if more of us become so urbanized and we're not so sensitive to nature and outdoors, then we as a country will do less to advocate for nature or wildlife. I think that might impact us in the long run. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long run.
There's more and more research showing how important nature is for mental health, how important it is to spend time in nature. And we definitely experienced it on this journey as well. When we visited big cities that don't have any nature, we feel really like we're suffocating, and you can also really feel how that the air is worse, that it's hotter, really physical things like that.